And it's unbelievable, really, how many people make the move, even if it's slightly more costly. Because frankly, the fact of the matter is, sustainability is on the agenda now. It's on people's minds. I mean, people do grasp the idea that there are consequences to continuing to operate irresponsibly. And people do, I think, get that now, in more than they used to. And I think there's less of a consequence for making a decision like that within an organizational structure in a business that there may have been 10 years ago. Oh, you're buying recycled paper and it costs $1 more a case is not a controversial decision in many companies anymore. Still is at times. And, you know, frankly, when that is the case, we reluctantly sell them the virgin paper. But we also make decisions ourselves about products that we wouldn't sell. For example, there was a period of time for about a month we had a private label bottled water. In our industry, all the wholesalers were trying to get all the distributors to private label bottled water because everyone wanted, you know, to give something back bottled water. Well, you know, very quickly, well, we did that kind of without, it was before Stephanie was there. Probably she wouldn't have let us do it. But we didn't really realize, we hadn't thought through how bad bottled water is from the point of view of international water. And the argument's pretty strong. So we know we immediately eliminated that from our product line. So if people still want it, they're going to get, you know, the Crystal Kaiser or something like that, but they're not going to. We didn't want to represent what we knew to be an environmentally toxic decision. So,
thank you. Robert, medicines that are prescribed by your doctors and often not completely used by patients become an interesting and complicated waste problem with, you know, flush down the drain, affecting the bay and fisheries and so forth. Do you have a take-back program for unused medicines?
Okay, so we actually have pharmaceuticals are handled by another department, I must admit. So my expertise is not on the pharmaceutical side. My responsibility is around all the products and equipment side. So I'm not as fluent on that piece of it, but I can't really talk to them on Gil, actually.
Okay, thank you. For either of you, how has the down economy affected your sustainability efforts? Additional challenges, additional opportunities, barriers to putting these into place? Either of you could speak to that.
Well, again, I mean, I emphasize the importance to just incorporate into our normal business practices. I think that, if you can make it part of normal business, then when you have a downturn, it's not like, you know, if people are trying to make cuts, it's not like let's get rid of the environmental department. It's just a normal part of what we're doing. Plus, you know, I can talk through the examples. I mean, we saved $12 million last year through improved environmental choices. So some of those examples where we've moved fully to the EPEAT Gold level for laptops and monitors. If you're buying IT equipment, laptops and monitors, there's basically an Energy Star rating. It's Energy Star, but it's also the toxins and chemicals that go into the product as well. And we've moved fully over to that. And there's an energy saving and a cost savings from moving to that. We're also reprocessing single-use medical devices. So within healthcare, you can imagine there's an awful lot of devices that come in, they're disposable, and they get chucked out, mainly for infection control reasons. But we're increasingly looking at where we can remanufacture and re-sterilize products, and there's enormous cost savings from doing that as well. We essentially are able to remanufacture and re-sterilize them for half the cost of buying a brand new product, and they actually come back at a higher specification as well. So there's a lot of environmental things we can do that also drive cost savings. So I think because we've managed to prove that, there's really a belief that the economic situation doesn't really impact that. Plus, it's just inherently an important part of Kaiser Permanente's culture as well. So it's not a program that's really going to be impacted by that.
Thank you, Mike.
Jeez. Well, I would answer that in two ways. First of all, I mean, our business is dependent upon how many people are sitting at their desks consuming office supplies. So as the unemployment rate increases, our prospect base decreases. So everybody in our industry is down 5 to 8%. On the other hand, it's interesting for a company our size, the fact that companies are downsizing and looking very closely at their cost structure opens up customers to us who would not have invited us in before. So everybody's looking at their cost structure. Everybody's looking at their line items in their operating expenditures. And office supplies sometimes is 15-20% of what they're buying if you include the paper and the toner products and the printing and the furniture and all that stuff. So where people used to be comfortable before, companies were comfortable before, now they're looking to squeeze every dollar out of the cost side. They're inviting competitors in where we wouldn't have gotten invited in. So when we're in, then we can make our case about our cost competitiveness. So we are actually getting customers now that we wouldn't have gotten 5 years ago. Because everybody's looking for the lowest cost or the best, the more reliable, or the cheaper products or whatever. So the companies that are the leading brands, the Staples and the Office Depots, they're the ones that are losing the accounts because everyone knows them. So it's the kind of the smaller, local, competitive companies that I think are getting greater opportunities in this down economy. I mean, it's an interesting phenomenon. I think most companies my size would share that interpretation, that you're finding yourself in sales situations that 5 years ago would be very difficult to break in because they were quite happy with what they had, and now they're looking around for a change.
So both of your organizations have significant purchasing power, or ability to drive some design and procurement decisions, or in some cases, very significant purchasing power. What kind of advice do you have for small and medium-sized companies? What can they do, given that they have to, in effect, take what's on the shelf or what's offered to them? Where do you suggest that they focus in making some of the improvements that you've made? Mike, let's go with you first.
Making some of the sustainability improvements?
Yeah. What do you suggest to small and medium-sized companies, in fact, to many of your customers? How do you advise them to get on this path?
Well, I think the first thing I advise them is that I would tell them that there's this broad infrastructure of expertise out there that smaller companies that don't have the in-house expertise can rely on. You know, books like yours didn't exist 10 years ago. You couldn't go to like a cookbook of here's the 50 things you could do right away to green your company. I mean, that stuff is now fairly mainstream. Stop Waste, organizations like that. There are the Sustainable Business Alliance. There are lots of organizations that are there as resources for companies that don't have internal resources to figure these things out themselves. And, you know, it's just a question of asking. So I think it's a much easier environment now to figure out what the next thing is, because there's a lot of, I mean, I wouldn't have been able myself to figure, I mean, I made the decision to get the solar, but that seemed to be a pretty simple one. But the box thing and the truck e-waste thing, that stuff that came out of expertise that, you know, I was doing other things. So we had somebody on staff. But if you don't have somebody on staff, so there's some organization out there that's waiting to come in and let you know what the top 10 things you can do to make an immediate impact. So people need to take advantage of that infrastructure now because it's there.
Robert?
Yeah, and I would also add, I mean, if you're not a large enough organization to influence how your suppliers change their products and the way they operate, but I mean, there are plenty of mature markets out there where there are good environmental choices. So there's no shortage of, I mean, a lot of the opportunities that we're moving forwards on are just taking advantage of products that are already out there. I mean, you know, I talked about laptops and desktops, but you know, it's essentially this EP grade. Any Energy Star devices. I mean, you can find these ratings, and that's always going to be a good choice. Low energy lighting. I mean, there's rapid advancements in low energy lighting right now. Within a few years, we're going to be seeing, I talked about LED in the surgical lights. We're going to be seeing LED within normal lighting as well. The quality of the light technology has come on phenomenally. So there's just a lot of fantastic new products and technology coming onto the marketplace, and many of them cost less. So it's not a difficult decision. You know, biodiesel fuel is another one. It doesn't cost more than normal fuel. EPA has a Smart Way program. So if you have distributors or fleets, ask your distributor if they are signed up to the Smart Way program that the EPA does, which basically encourages them to use more efficient distribution and logistics methodologies. Microfiber mops. You know, we had a significant cost savings moving to microfiber mops, and they use less chemicals in the cleaning process. They use less water, and the mops last for an awful lot longer. So it's some of these are, you know, no-brainers, and the technology's out there. Vending machines. You know, we've moved to a model where vending machines have 50% healthy pick products within the vending machines. So we've moved from candy bars to Cliff bars, and we've moved from normal chips to low sodium, low fat chips and nuts and raisins and things like this. So 50% of our vending machines just contain healthier food. We saw a 6% increase in revenue from our vending machines when we switched to healthier food. I mean, no-brainer. And recycling. I mean, we're doing recycling at a number of our facilities, and again, you know, recycling doesn't have to cost anything more. I mean, you can set up recycling in a way where, and we're implementing a program right now where we're a whole comprehensive recycling program across our facilities of a whole range of products. So I just say there's a number of thing you can do where there's already mature products in the marketplace that can also save you money as well. So.
But can I make another comment? You know, one of the things that I think people should look at the long term of what this movement of sustainability is. I mean, when I started my business, or when I went to college, I didn't know a single community activist type, a social service type, that would ever have chosen business as a career. I mean, it wasn't a career choice back in. I went to school in the early 70s, and the people who were targeted towards the nonprofit world or government service or the academic world or philanthropy, none of those people would ever have considered business as being a legitimate tool to accomplish their social goals. But the thing has completely changed. I mean, and even when I started my company, I had no formal business training other than 15 years of on-the-job training with Xerox and other companies that I had a job at. So I didn't really have any formal training. But now, if you go to the graduate programs of business in this country, I mean, these kids are just flooding out of these schools. And first of all, they're going into the schools with a community activist kind of an orientation, saying, teach me about all the fundamentals of how to run a business, but also teach me about sustainability, teach me about social justice, teach me about corporate social responsibility. So this whole new generation of business leaders is basically coming into the fold with questions like this on their agenda. And they are going to bring such a higher level of exposure to issues that have a direct consequence to quality of life and community that we'll be looking back 50 years from now and we'll see that this is a transformative time when businesses are forced to basically address the consequences of what they do in terms of the larger environment, the larger quality of life, because the people who are coming in to run these businesses now with the skill from the best schools, they're going to demand it, and they're going to push it through their organization. And also, they'll do it in a way that works, and that's good for the customers as well. So I think it's a really exciting time. That's why we're all here together.
Thank you. Justin, how are we on time? Okay. Thank you all for your questions, and what a treasure trove of experience and insight we have here. Just to sum up briefly, some of the things that I've heard is that there's an enormous power to simply the act of focusing on this issue and making a commitment to deal with it. And that may be the most central thing you've heard from both of these organizations. They have said this matters, we're going to figure out a way to make it work. Coming from that, they've started to ask different questions. They're asking different questions in their organization, of their surgeons, their salespeople, their suppliers, and just the act of asking a different question opens up an opportunity that just wouldn't be there if you didn't ask the question. Do you have such and such available? Well, yeah, sure. Nobody's ever asked this before. Boom, done. What's the cost of that? Nothing. And there's an engagement process here, engaging people inside the organization, in the sales organization, the people who actually use the materials, engaging with the customers and suppliers, looking together at these problems, looking at how do we collaboratively find new solutions that serve the needs of everybody in the supply chain, and as Mike mentioned, reaching outside the organization to the growing body of support that's available with organizations like Stop Waste, private companies, public resources, and our good friend Dr. Google. There's a wealth of information available at everybody's fingertips now that wasn't there a few years ago. And key in all of this is not assuming. The old assumption that green costs money is over. It's dead. It's gone. Jeff Immelt, the CEO of General Electric, said some years ago when they announced the Eco-Imagination Program, which in 2005 was seen as a $10 billion revenue initiative. I think they've now kicked it over $20 billion. Immelt said, folks, green is green, period. Sustainability is going to make us money, and that's a big shift. So, as many people still assume that it will cost money, those of you who recognize that it doesn't need to, that in fact could be profit positive, could be contributing to better quality, as well as better price and performance, as well as better safety, as well as better health, as well as better environment, as well as more customer satisfaction and employee satisfaction, have an enormous competitive advantage in the marketplace. And the other opportunity we have here, which is embodied by these awards and by the Stop Waste Partnership, is the opportunity to learn from each other, to share best practices, both with the folks you directly do business with and those that you share in community with, to find ways that we can work together to raise the standard of practice, to identify and drive the policy changes that we need to support this work, and to carry it on to the next step. So please join me again in thanking our panel.